Now, Prof, I know that you don't like to talk too much, but beyond good, beyond these things, there are many things that you've done. Okay. For example, I just discovered that you actually design currencies for some countries. Can you tell us about that? Okay. And some of the other things that you've been doing? I know you work with the diaspora, the UN and all that. Can you give us an insight into some of those things? Starting with the currency.
I know.
Currency consultants.
Money on the table, the most important thing. And it all is just another reflection of what I do. You see, and you should remember, it's not as if I go searching for these type of products. They come to me, because at the end of the day, it depends upon your interaction with communities, with people, and with other societies. In the case of that particular currency, which was done for the discovery of the Americas, the discovery of the Americas, and it was going to be a commemorative bill, because they were celebrating 500 years. And obviously, with my cultural background, and understanding, and also the soft spot that society had for me, they found it proper also to involve me in that process.
Because you worked in that country before.
Of course. That is where the fundamentals of my professional life began.
That's Colombia. I mean, it is not a secret.
That's Colombia. So that country is the one that opens up many of the pathways. One of the first notable projects, which is actually above the currency, has been their bank building, because that is the repository of even the currency. So I had the opportunity to design their bank building. So with that, it meant that, and it would be interesting to know how it happened. Would that be okay?
Sure.
Because you see, the interesting thing is that I was in the US, and I was already working in a company called Malcolm Greer Company. And I was working on a new city for Saudi Arabia, which has actually already materialized after I'd finished architecture in Rhode Island School of Design. And while I was there was a gentleman who I had met in the university in the US. He had brought his daughter there. And this was one of the millionaires of that country. And he immediately took to me. And so he knew what I was doing in that school and what I was represented in that university. So he had gotten that contract to do that in his country. He's a gentleman who literally owned almost all the banks. And he really concentrated on the housing aspect, all the issues of matches, all the issues of coffee, all the issues of cars. Everything was under this gentleman, Dr. Pablo Toro, who was an engineer from Cornell. And his daughter, Amelia Toro, who became one of the topmost apparel designers in that part. So it's through that interaction we had. So he had already had that contract, and the project had already been assigned. And I think somewhere along the line, he realized that they were not getting anywhere. And so he commented to his board that he knows an African. Because remember, we go first as an African, not as a Ghanaian. And they thought they should bring me on board. So I left my job in the US, which nobody could understand. And I went to a country where I couldn't speak one language of the Spanish. I couldn't speak. But yet I went. And I started designing that building from scratch. And I was there recently, just 3 months ago. And later on we'll share some of the pictures to know that that bank building still remains one of the main icons on their main avenue, Avenida Chile. So that building became an icon to everybody. It was very unique. It was done in 1983, 84. It was used with a material called alugobon, which now is very much used a lot in Ghana. The facial thing that we're doing with aluminium. I used that in 1982, 83. And it had a floating facade. And the major feature was a space frame, which is a free form, which included a structure which inclines 45 degrees, 5 floors high. And all of those things brought a lot of interest. So that also caught the interest of the academic field. So before too long, I was drafted into their main university. And so I began lecturing through and speaking Spanglish. Spanglish.
That's Spanish English.
And that also led me into the academic angle. And that is how come, after writing a number of books and doing quite a number of things, That is how come I dovetailed into my professorial shoes. And it is good for all of us to know that that came in 1986. So while that happened, it was that opportunity, that bank building, that sounded the alarm that there's this African who can do what he can. So that is how come I was able to get the issue of doing the currency and most of the housing projects. And up to date, I did 240,000 housing units. I can always remember that number. And it went beyond that. A lot of imagery for the nation now started to come into my hands, which also included doing political campaigns.
Interesting, very, very interesting. I mean, I don't know, I'm mesmerized. And we're just warming up, so I think this is the right time to take a short break. And when we come back, we're now going into, for me, why I'm here, the design of the NDC logo. So we'll get into that. Prof, so thank you very much. We're back. Now, for me, as a political activist, you know, and an unrepentant, unapologetic NDC person, one of the most exciting things why I have so much love and respect for you is that you are the person who actually designed the logo of the party. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Thank you. We should know the source and how everything began. And it's important just to know that the source came from the chairman of the party, whom I knew way back.
Chairman?
That is Chairman Rawlings.
Okay, so chairman of the party, chairman of the PNDC.
At that time.
Okay, so everybody used to call him Chairman Rawlings. Yes. So he was the leader when PNDC transitioned to NDC. So
yes, it's important to know that I knew him long before that. I knew him through a lady called Verna Warren, a Jamaican. She actually used to be in Nkrumah's entourage in Tessana, and our chairman used to live close by there. And because my mother actually is from the Caribbean, so there was a bit of a synergy there. And so we're talking about early 70s. But when everything metamorphosed into 1979 and we had turbulences in this nation, which has not been seen, and we were all sent home, I was then working on my thesis. And my thesis was a illustrated history of Ghana, because I was doing graphic design. And it got to the stage where the issue of the coup and the attempted 15th May came into play. So I decided now to shift everything I was doing and concentrate on that angle. So I was now actually drawing the lifetime issues of how everything unfolded. So while we were sent home...
Is that a book?
Okay. Yes. So that is, yes. So that began from 1978.
A book?
Yes. Yes. And that is in French. It's in all the different languages. Yes.
And eventually you became very proficient in Spanish, right?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
So the idea was that through that, I was able to join them while the revolution was actually still proceeding.
Okay.
So I joined them in Burma camp while they were still even going to take over GBC. And I was busy drawing everything because I'm rewriting a story. So I was able to get first hand, and I was able to finally meet him in the forest. And I told him about what I was doing. And that's how we first met. So I was able to get a first-hand issue on that. And then I shortly then left for the US to do my architecture. So I had the document with me. And I think several years down the line, by 83, I think he remembered and he informed this information that, look, there's a gentleman who we met. We should try to locate him. And so I was located in Colombia, because then, by then I was working in Colombia. And they wanted to have the book. So I came in 1985, and I still remember the late EKT Donko, who was the then chief of staff. He was the one who visited my house in Laboni. And I handed over the original works of this book, which is narrating the real-time true story of that. And so while that was going on, I got to understand what was going on, because I liked to understand trajectories and history. So on one of my visits later on in 1988, there was going to be the non-aligned conference, because Ghana had now just won the slot. And the chairman, Rawlings, decided that, look, the architect who he can get to put that conference in place is Professor Addo. So I was put in charge of the non-aligned conference as the organizer of how that whole conference would come about, of the organizing of the non-aligned conference. And I was specifically attributed to the beautification of the capital. So that is how come, and anytime I come through a sabbatical leave, so I can't stay on. I've been coming and going. I come in support, go. So after doing that work, which was all seen, of course, as usual, there will be some changes here and there, and everybody comes to play. But at the end of the day, that also materialized. And with many other people also involved, I would mention my good friend, Dr. Donata, who has always been a staunch person and believing what we are doing. So I would also like to also take off my hat to him and also.
He's my friend. We had a code we speak in Arabic.
Yes.
Yes,
because we were all on the committee, and I was the head of the committee. We were three. I was the head, and we had him, and then one, Alex Dodo, who was the boss of PWD. So that was the team, and I was the head. Now, when that was done, I left. And I remember when I left back to Colombia, the chairman got in touch with me and said, look, Prof, we're going to be turning to democracy. And I wanted to come, because he also was aware of the works I was doing in Colombia to do with campaigns. You see, I was working on a campaign for one of their presidential candidates called Luis Carlos Gala. And he was certainly going to win. And the weekend when he was going to have his final rally, which I normally do all the things, Luis Carlos Gala told me, well, come and sit with me on the stage so that we can do it. And I declined, because I'm a foreigner. And something just struck me to say, let me rather abscond, because it was a weekend, and instead of me going, like it's happening in Accra, instead of me going to Kumasi or to Takrady in terms of distances, I decided actually to go to my house in London. So I left South America without understanding and flew to my place in London, only to be woken up the next morning by my brother, may his soul rest in peace, that come and see on the TV, where they were literally mowing down all the people on the stage.
Wow.
And everybody was killed.
Assassination.
Including the president.
My goodness.
At the same place where I set up.
My goodness.
That was
and you would have been there.
Obviously, because I had got, and I was asked to be there. But something told me, no, leave.
God saved
and
you
so
for a purpose.
I left there, and that is when I started to get an inclination to come to Ghana. So now you know the reason. That is the main reason. I was doing political issue. These people were against the drug cartels. And when I had my bank building, which was the most prominent bank building, both the drug people and the guerrillas were now working together. And they were in their bombing mode. So they had bombed almost all the buildings on that avenue. But curiously, they had left my building. So the country was now in red alert. They were trying to question, why have they left that building? And the sound bite that came out was Africana. So I realized that I had a very soft spot for that country, whether you are dealing with people on the other side of the law or people in.